Excellent. So from now on, again, I cannot see your faces, I cannot read the chat, but I can listen to you. So feel free to interrupt anytime. So once again, welcome to the Value Creation and Selling Online Training Program. That's the session number 1. And I'm going to describe a little bit the next sessions that we're going to have. But as I said, the main goal of all this training, not only this session, but all the other sessions, is to shift the discussion from price to value. And the way we're going to do that is by exchanging experiences among ourselves, because as I said, we bring different experiences, different methods to the table, but also assessing case examples and validated strategies of what has been done before and has worked. So that's the main goal of this training. A brief overview of the agenda. The first hour, because this is a 2-hour meeting, 2-hour discussion, basically the first hour will be to give some foundation. So overview of the training program. Of course, we're going to discuss how it's going to be the next sessions as well. And then we're going to take a look into value creation. Note the difference between definition of value and value creation, because you may define the value of your message, but if you do not create the value, that value message is basically lost. So how can you actually create value? How can you demonstrate that? And then to whom? And we enter into the 4 types of decision makers, because there is no one size fits all. There is no one value message that will resonate with everyone out there who is responsible for purchasing your technology solution or can influence that purchase decision. It's not going to resonate to everyone. Then, of course, we are human beings. We're going to have a 10-minute break after basically the first hour. It's a 10 minutes, no more than that, so we can have our bio break, grab some coffee, grab some water, whatever, and then we come back. When we come back, we're going to have an overview of the value creation process and a case exercise. The case exercise is intended to last about 30 minutes. We're going to have some presentations from you as well, who feels comfortable, and I can already advance. It will be important, if it's possible for you, to take some notes, because you will need to revert to the notes that you take, to comment, to have this case exercise with us. And then we're going to have the closure and, of course, next steps for the next session. First of all, I wanted to show this great picture of Giri and I. This is the day that I was there in Prague visiting the Aspironics office, and I learned with Giri that the most important thing is always to smile, and that's here I am smiling, and I'm smiling here as well. And if you don't know it yet, the Aspironics office is a fantastic office. It should be officially part of any tour in Prague, because it's one of the most beautiful offices that I have ever been. So once again, Aspironics, Giri, everyone, thank you for having me there. But that's the day that we started to have the idea of this session. And a little bit about my background. As I said, 28 years of medical experience. Out of those, I spent 10 years, the first 10 years, selling medical devices. And I started as a sales rep, then became a sales manager. And I quickly realized that in order to meet my goals, my sales quotas, I would need to tackle different stakeholders than the physicians only. Talking to doctors, talking to physicians only was not going to ensure that I would meet my quotas. And that's the moment that I started to look for other areas, such as reimbursement, health economics, and combine all of them together into how can I justify the prices of my products, the products that I'm selling. I was born in São Paulo, Brazil. I'm Brazilian. I have an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm based in an airplane. But when I am not in an airplane, I'm either in The Hague, the Netherlands, or in São Paulo, Brazil. That's a little bit about myself. Now, let's take a look into the training program. Let's have an overview. Now, as I said, this is your session, your training, and I'm here to learn as much as you are here to learn as well, but learn from you. And I'm pretty sure some of you know each other, but maybe you haven't discussed about your methods specifically about demonstrating value, engaging with clients. So let's definitely exchange knowledge, participate, and have questions, comments here, and disagreements as well. Something I want to say is that uh, at least my intention is not to focus on any specific type of medical technology. There are three types: diagnostics, devices, and digital health. I'm focusing on them all. I'm not focusing also in any specific medical field, cardiac or orthopedics, diabetes. That's not the intention. However, when we have some case examples, it might be that we have to focus on some specific situation. But if that does not resonate to you, then please join in and try to and comment. It's like, listen, you gave an example of I don't know, a pacemaker. I work in continuous blood glucose monitoring or artificial intelligence. Let me bring this to my reality, or help me bring this to my reality. So once again, we're not focused on any specific indication type of a product. Interrupt anytime you have any questions, comments, and we all had hard lessons in our lives, and when we make mistakes, especially when we make those exceptional mistakes, that's when we definitely learn and definitely have the key points that we bring to our careers. And so by all means, bring those forward as well and share your experience once again with us. Now, each of the sessions, including this one, will be structured in 4 blocks. We're going to start basically discussing a common challenge in the industry, which will basically lay down the foundation for which we will bring the solution that we wanted to explore, which is a method or a process, and as I said, the methodology to implement that solution, and then have a case exercise so we can, in a short period of time, have an initial application of what we are seeing today, and then of course continue afterwards. This is the session number 1. So here, the session Introduction to Value Creation and Selling. This is the session that we're going to basically look into some foundations, but there are going to be 3 other sessions that you can, we're going to inform you the dates afterwards. The second session will take place in February 2024, and it's going to be about overcoming price pressure and competition. So then we're going to have some more detailed examples of situations in which there was a price pressure, which is basically something we faced every single day. And we're going to have examples of companies that could respond to that very well, did not respond to that, and didn't do anything. And let's definitely see what has happened under these 3 circumstances. We're not going to give the names of the companies, the name of the products, because there's no need to do that. But basically, we're going to have some real case examples and some discussions about how can we, in practice, change the perception of and shift the perception from price to value as well, looking into case examples. Once we have that with session number 1, the base, the foundation, session number 2, focus on even further on price. In April 2024, we're going to start talking about implementing value creation in distribution. Then the idea is that we're going to start building your value creation plan, which may be applicable to one of the products, because you're going to have to select one product in this session today that we're going to have for the other sessions if we continue together, and I hope so. But that's the moment that we're going to start building this process. But what is beautiful is that the process can be applied to other technologies. So I understand that you, being distributors or being commercial teams, you are dealing with different products, different brands, maybe even different brands under different companies, and we needed to prioritize. And there are so many things we need to take into consideration. However, the process that we're going to learn at least will definitely be able to be applied to any single medical technology. If we were talking about pharmaceuticals, it would be slightly different, but that's not the scope of this training. And last but not least, how can we ensure we maintain the pillars of value creation and selling, and we maintain that into our organization. Now, briefly to discuss what we're going to review today. Once again, today, the session number 1, we're going to talk about the definition of value, value creation, some other aspects on how value is perceived, which is going to be extremely interesting. We're going to even remember a film, a movie here, and see if you remember that movie, which gives us a very good example of a value perception. But then in February, we're going to, as I mentioned, discuss that session number 2, discuss more about price pressure and competition, how to respond to low-cost brands, because in many circumstances we bring the value products. And then afterwards, session number 3, also next year, start to create the plan to implement the value creation in distribution. And then session number 4, how to maintain this plan, how to have the right metrics to know that we are on track. So that's an overview what we're going to have. And at the end of the 4 sessions, as I said, the idea is that you will have all the tools, all the knowledge to tackle a certain product and say, this is how I'm going to demonstrate the value, or what is missing. If I follow this process, what is missing so that I can communicate value? And you will be able to perceive that yourself, because you showed your product to the market and somebody perceived that before you. Having said that, we're going to get into the introduction to value creation and selling. Let me stop here for a second and ask if somebody has any questions, any comments, somebody gives me a feedback before we move ahead.
All great. Looking forward.
Oh, great. Looking forward. Excellent. Thank you so much. Remember the 4 blocks that we discussed. The first block is the challenge, the situation. And we in the medical technology industry, we are naturally excited with innovations, with new technologies. And that is great because we are changing lives of patients, healthcare professionals, healthcare institutions, healthcare systems. We are creating a lot of impact. However, there is a downside to that. If you look into all the industries in the world, there is no other industry that is more innovative than the medical technology. And when I say medical technology, I'm talking again, devices, diagnostics, and digital health. I'm not talking about pharmaceuticals. As you can see, pharmaceuticals is down here. On average, every 37 minutes, there is a new medical technology in the market. What is the implication of that? When we come to a certain healthcare institution, provider, and we say, we have a new product, we have this innovation here, this new medical technology, although we are excited, we are happy with this, our client, our payer, purchaser, when they see a new medical technology, they think another one, another upfront cost. So although we are the most innovative industry in Europe and quite frankly in the world, there are not enough resources or money to cover all medical technologies that are out there. So here comes the first situation. How can I ensure that my technology will stand out, not only because it is new or because it's maybe not new, but there are other technologies coming, but how can I stand out? Because just by saying I have a new medical technology, it's not sufficient. As we can see here, no other industry launches more products per year than medical technology, even more than digital communication, more than computer technology, and way more than pharmaceuticals. So this rate of innovation, and actually this is becoming faster and faster. When I started Value Connected, I was measuring the average time it takes. When I started Value Connected 10 years ago, it was 45 minutes. Now it's 37 minutes, potentially 34 now. So more and more technologies are coming to the market. So what has this created? This has created an impact on the way that we demonstrate, we commercialize medical products. When I started my career in medical sales, this was in 1997, basically I was focusing on technical features. I would say, listen, I work for company X. We have this product. It's the only product that has this metal alloy or has these characteristics. And basically, just by mentioning the brand of my company, the brand of my products, or both, I would have basically 50% of the work done, because the hospital, the doctor, the payer would say, okay, I know your brand, I trust your brand. Let's definitely talk about that. The problem is that time passed and the technical differences between the products started to be smaller, smaller, and smaller, to the point that some products became extremely similar, others not so much different. And then our industry, and I love this part, our industry created a new role. We created the job title of the key opinion leader, and the key opinion leader will basically do all the work for us. Having the relationship with the key opinion leader, he or she will introduce our technologies, and then with his or her credibility, this will help us and this will guide us through the market. And to this day, many companies follow almost blindly the key opinion leaders. And for a long period of time, this worked really well. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should not follow the key opinion leaders, because of course I'm being a little bit sarcastic the way that I say that. We must have key opinion leaders. We definitely must listen to them and take their minds into consideration. But would you listen to a key opinion leader who is, for example, a doctor or a nurse or a medical professional in the institution? Would you trust her or his comments on how you would sell the technology to the institution? Does this key opinion leader know all the details of the business model of the institution? Probably not. And my point is that after a few years, it became very interesting to see how focusing only on the key opinion leaders was not sufficient anymore. I've attended many conferences in which we had hospital directors, large payers, members of the government, and all of them said basically the same thing. The worst thing that can happen is when somebody comes and say, oh, we have already spoken with your doctor, all you have to do is to sign here. No, these non-clinical decision makers, they became more sophisticated. And now we're not only talking to people with a white jacket, we're talking to people with suit and tie or suit, people who are more used with Excel spreadsheets than with medical articles. And the idea is to focus on the communication. How can I ensure that I communicate not only with clinical decision makers, but also non-clinical decision makers, economic decision makers? Because now we have multiple stakeholders relying on the brand, relying on the relationship with the key opinion leaders is not sufficient anymore. And this is the trend that we have seen for quite some time in the medical technology industry. Anybody has any comments, any thoughts, anything they wanted to share about this process? And I would say the left side, the brands, it was the 90s, and the relationship, this was the beginning of the 2000, 2010 something, but starting 2020, 2015 onwards, then we started to focus more on communication. Any thoughts, any comments from anyone here? I guess not. So we continue our session. But what is value after all? We're talking about value. And value is basically the answer to the question, why should I choose your medical technology? And choose your medical technology to use, choose your medical technology to buy, choose your medical technology to include in a tender process, in the description of the tender processing. That's basically the answer that we are trying to answer. As I said, as important as the answer is who is asking this question. We needed to consider that. But when we talk about value, it's important to consider 5 aspects. The first is that value is actually a perception. If I come to you and say, what is the value of this computer versus the other. Regardless of what you're going to tell me, probably you will start describing your perception. Oh, this computer is nice because it helps me with my work because I have to go everywhere. Okay, so the value of this computer is that it's lightweight, for example. For medical devices, it's basically the same thing. What is the perception that is coming from the market? And we're going to revert to that later on. But a perception of what? Of the benefits for those who are involved with this. This technology, does it bring benefits to the clinical decision makers, economic decision makers, institutions? We also must understand our value is much stronger when we have a competitor. But wait, my product is unique. There is nothing that does what my product is doing. I agree. This is the case in many circumstances, and it's important to maintain that in mind. But then the competitor is yesterday, when you were not bringing this innovative technology in the market, what was happening? There is a huge medical technology, medical device company. The name does not matter, but they developed a device to treat Barrett's esophagus. And we helped them to demonstrate this value. And basically they came to us and said the same thing. Listen, there is nothing comparable to our technology. The comparable is diagnostic, then that's your competitor. Beforehand, the patient was only being monitored because there was no treatment available. But now you are treating those patients or part of those patients. How can we compare that? Looking into the patient pathways. And then, of course, I'm going to discuss more about that. But if you do not have a competitor, then maybe your competitor is doing nothing. And is doing nothing more expensive than using your technology? Is doing nothing hurting the patients? And as I said, measure that, quantifiable versus the doing nothing versus the competitor. And last but not least, combining clinical and economic aspects. And it's amazing how we still have situations, and what you're gonna see now literally happened. I was in Italy with a client, and we were there having a meeting with the hospital director. I believe this was in Milano, and we were there basically having this meeting, and it reached a point that the hospital director said to my client, so why should I use your technology in our hospital? And my client, who was basically started to work with us to help them during these engagements, I could see firsthand he was saying, well, because it comes in 5 different sizes. And my question to you is that, would you consider that as a value? I heard things such as companies said, you should use my product, my technology, because it's based in Linux, or because it is blue. And probably the fact that it comes in 5 different sizes, maybe it helps to stock the technology there, to allocate the technology, because it's blue, it makes it easier to locate with the blood of the patient, because it uses Linux, maybe it's cheaper for installation, but we needed to walk this path. Do not rely that our clients, your clients, will basically understand your value just because you are describing the features of your technology. But then, how can we create value? And what we are going to see now, it is probably, if not the most important slide of this entire session, but one of the most important slides. So this is very important indeed. Value creation is created, by redundancy, from clinical relevance. And the concept of a clinical relevance is that you understand how your technology impacts the patient pathway. Let me show to you how this works. This is a typical pathway of a patient. A patient may start not necessarily on the screening, may start on diagnostics, but basically in general you have the screening in which you are monitoring patients for a certain situation. Something strange occurs, then you have into the diagnostic part to be more accurate. Then the diagnosis, okay, if something is wrong, then we go into treatment. And then after treatment, we might need to monitor the patient during rehabilitation or some period in which the patient is getting better until the patient is healed. And this can go even a circle then go back into screening mode. Of course, many patients get already in the diagnostic, some others get into treatment. For example, if I getting out there and I get hit by a car, I go straight into treatment. But basically, that's the overall view of the patient pathway. In general, when we are talking about diagnostics, we are looking into screening and diagnostic part. Devices come afterwards in the treatment part. And now digital health on the monitoring, because healing you may not need much in that sense. Now, when we look into this, we basically see the order in which they are occurring. But what is important is the clinical relevance. The clinical relevance is not the focus on your product. The clinical relevance is what comes afterwards. If I have a diagnostic, the value of the way that I create value from my diagnostic technology is not how fast it is not how precise it is. It's how it will allow me to not me, but allow your client, customer, to change the treatment pathway or improve the monitoring and the healing. If I have a device, a therapeutic device, the value is not so much on the treatment itself, it's what happens afterwards. And for digital health, the same. What is interesting is that the earlier you start, for example, diagnostics, the more clinical relevance you have, right? Because if I'm able to properly diagnose a patient that he or she has or doesn't have that condition, I can get the patient in treatment earlier, or if the patient is fine, just save a lot of money. However, the earlier you start, which is the stronger the clinical relevance, the more challenging it is. Because in many circumstances, you are the same stakeholder, your client who are buying the diagnostic may not be the same stakeholder who are experiencing the clinical relevance. And this is something that we needed to take into consideration into that aspect as well. For example, and I will give an example and then ask if you have any examples as well. Wound care. In wound care, in the NHS in the UK, we were, this was with Badent as well, we were working at a company that basically was manufacturing negative pressure wound therapy device, a therapy that basically creates a vacuum in the wound to accelerate healing. And basically we would sell this device, and the company developed a portable device. So the patient could leave the hospital earlier and go with the device to their homes. But the stakeholder paying for that device was not the same stakeholder who would have the benefit of the clinical relevance, because it was basically the trust was the hospital who are buying the device because the patient was leaving the treatment monitoring, but it was the trust who would get the benefit of paying for fewer home care consultations, things like this. And there are some of the challenges that we have. So basically, I would like to stop get here and basically to ask a couple of you if you can give me some examples of diagnostics devices or digital health, just simple example of one product, and how do you see the clinical relevance of that product? Anyone? I guess we do not have any examples now. Very good. Everybody's shy, so we're gonna get some more engagement later. No worries. Now, I hope the aspect of clinical relevance became clear to you, because this is something we're gonna basically use as one of the foundations. So basically, another statistics as well, and now I wanted to hear you telling me some numbers. And feel free to give any numbers that you want. Let's imagine, and this can be in Czech Republic, Brazil, Netherlands, UK, Germany, France, it does not matter. Let's say in a certain country, any country, out of the 100% of the healthcare expenditure, think about like a pie. circle, out of the 100% of healthcare expenditure, what percentage is related to medical technologies? In other words, how much in percentage does medical technology represents in terms of healthcare costs? 10%, 30, 50, 80? Just give me some numbers. I wanted to hear at least 3 numbers out there.
I think it depends on the gap, no? Sometimes 10% is already a big gap for customers, but it depends sometimes on the benefits as well. And the absolute value of that, or maybe the annual gap they can spend on that or something like that.
Right, so you say that on average, a country would spend 10% of the total on average. And of course, we have different technologies, I know that. But on average, we have a country and they spent X billions of euros, 10% was related to medical technology. Very good. Next one.
Yeah, we need to understand also if this 10% includes personnel. I mean, this is complicated too.
Only medical technology.
No,
Very
only
simple.
medical.
Only
Yeah.
medical technology.
10%. Yeah.
And what is the pie? The pie is also including pharmaceuticals and
Yeah.
hospital costs. That's the total pie of healthcare.
Yeah.
Total healthcare expenditure. Total
Then
healthcare.
I would say 5% for medical technology.
Yeah, it would be less, maybe less.
5, 10, whatever.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anybody thinks a higher number?
Yeah, Ernesto, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, it's about 11% in the Netherlands.
11%. Excellent.
11.2. Yeah.
11.2. Very good. That was very, very precise. Anyone else? One last number. Very good. So actually, you were all very much in line because on average is 7.5% in Europe. On average, taking all the European markets. Again, oh, in the Netherlands is 11.2. In other markets, that's fine. But the point is, look into this circle here. This is the average total healthcare expenditure of a country. And we do not need to get so sophisticated here. Everything is included there. Personnel, materials, electricity, disposables, pharmaceuticals, everything is included there. The blue part, which is a thin pizza slice, that's the cost, that is the price of medical technologies. Then my question to you is that if we represent a small portion of the total healthcare costs, why do we have so much price pressure? Why this is causing to us? In fact, why are we having this discussion in the first place? If our product represent on average less than 10% or something like this percent of the healthcare expenditures. Any thoughts? And by the way, congratulations, because when I ask this, I usually get answers. I know it's 20%, 30%. And then when I show this, I actually get angry people. No, it's not possible. How can you say that? Because everybody, but the question is, why? What are we doing here, guys? We don't represent the biggest portion of healthcare expenditure by far. So why so much price pressure?
Because we are the external part of it, I believe. Because all internal costs is more difficult to manage them from an organizational standpoint, but it's always easier to put the pressure on the external people.
I completely agree. It's always easier to come to the distributor or to the company and say, no, you are to be blamed because I'm going to protect my physician, I'm going to protect my personnel, I'm going to not look into my inefficiencies, I'm going to look externally. Completely agree. Any other reason? We also come with a price tag, right? Everybody knows how much our technologies cost, but do we know the hourly cost of a physician or the day cost of an ICU bed. But looking into some of the reasons, and the slide that I'm going to show to you came not only with interactions with a knowledgeable professional such as you are, but also from articles, from books. But basically, there are certain reasons why they focus on price. First of all, it's part of the game. So there are circumstances in which we are participating in a tender process for a region or a hospital or whatever, and the tender manager will on purpose bring 2 or 3 low-cost brands that they do not want to use. They will invite those low-cost brands just to put pressure on you. That's the first part of the most common reason that the focus on price occurs. Price is the first data to appear. That's what I mentioned about price tag. We know how much our technologies are selling. We give the discounts, we give the bundles, whatever, but it's written there. If I see that number, oh, it's 200, it's 1,000, why not 150? Why not 800? Also, sometimes we are talking to the wrong person. Sometimes we are talking to the stakeholder that might not take the decision, but it's focused on price. And this is not their fault. I remember when I was a sales rep, this was early, not early, but in the 90s, I remember introducing this technology to the doctor that I wanted to convince. And the doctor said, listen, I am convinced, Ernesto, but you needed to talk to the purchasing manager. He is the person that will evaluate that. And I went there. I had no idea what to present. But by the moment I got in there, he said, Ernesto, you are the first person from a medical technology company that comes here to explain me your product. Because the only thing that I can focus is on price. Because nobody explains to me why product A is more expensive than product B. And my job as a purchasing manager is to protect budgets. If I have 100 or 50, my job is to go to the 50 unless you explain to me why it's the 100. So you may be talking to the wrong person, or you may not be helping that person to understand what is behind that price, which gets to my last point, which is the most common. There is no perceived differentiated value. If I'm fighting with you for your price, that's because I don't understand the benefit or the value that your product is doing. I don't understand the clinical relevance of your product. I know your product will help me do a certain task, but what will happen afterwards? Can you explain that to me? And that's the main reason, not the only one, of course, and those 4 are not, there are more than that, but basically I wanted to combine that for you because there are 2 things we stand out here: clinical relevance and perception. And this is one of the mechanisms that we can deal with this aspect of price. Now, let's basically go into the ways we can tackle selling a medical device here. So after all, we basically have 2 ways to sell medical technologies. Either we can lower our price or we can demonstrate value. If we lower our price, the effect is immediate. We can say, listen, you know what? I'm going to lower my price. Probably you're going to get a deal, but you're going to create an expectation that the price will become smaller, smaller, and smaller. Versus if you demonstrate value, you will have short-term consequences. Maybe you do not close that sale. You're gonna have to invest on educating decision makers on what the value is that you're bringing, but it justifies the price. And the interesting thing is that you cannot do both. Either you lower your price or you demonstrate the value. If you lower your price, you are destroying the value message. Basically, you're telling my product has no value. If you demonstrate value, you're basically saying I'm going to justify my price to you. And this is important because if you lower your price in a certain country and you try to demonstrate value in another country, they may talk to each other. And usually the red part wins when that happens. So those are the 2 paths that we can take, and you basically have to select one. Now we're gonna get into the 4 types of decision makers. This is the last part of the session before we get into break. And let me ask you, have you heard about the Miller-Hyman selling methodology, which was first announced in the book in 1985 from called Strategic Selling? Has anyone heard about this method? I guess not.
No.
Very good. I had neither. And then I was introduced to this book when I was actually giving value-based selling training to a company in Rotterdam. The company was not Dutch, but we were there in Rotterdam, and I remember that. And they asked me, Ernesto, can you include the Miller-Hyman selling methodology? And I said, yes, after I learned what it is. And of course, I went there to research, and I found out, and I read the book, I found out this was an exceptional method that actually many people talk about. Even more people use it and are not aware that this was created by Robert Miller and Stephen Hyman. The idea of the Miller-Hyman methodology is to allow us to become a strategic partner to our customers. And the Miller-Hyman selling methodology applies only to business situations, not to business to customers, B2C, but B2B. And the main goal is to help customers see how this is interesting. The main goal is to help customers understand and derive or generate the maximum value from your product. And in order for you to help your customers derive the maximum value from your product, you must understand there are four types, in practice three, but four types of decision makers, and they have different ways to be influenced. The four types of the decision makers, according to Miller-Hyman, are the champion, who is the person who he may not be there, but when he is or she is, that's the person who basically is trying to help you. So it could be your key opinion leader. That person does not have all the power, but that person is supporting you. Then you have the user buyer, the person who will use your solution. That person will basically take your solution and include in their day-to-day routine or whatever they're working. You have the technical buyer. He or she will not use your solution, but will determine if your solution fits the requirements, the procedures, whatever. And finally, you have the economic buyer, which in a nutshell, it is the decision maker. Now, let's take a look into as in a different prism in those types of stakeholders. The champion is usually a user buyer. So we're gonna leave the champion aside because usually it's the person that's gonna use your technology. The user buyer should say yes. But if the user buyer says yes, it's not sufficient for you to sell. Other persons should say yes. But then it comes the two most interesting for me. And actually I will start with the most interesting, the technical buyer. The technical buyer has no power to decide to purchase, but he has all the power in the world to stop the purchasing process. He is the person that cannot say no. It does not matter if he does not say yes. That person cannot say no. And it's typically the most ignored stakeholder when we are engaging in the market. And the economic buyer should say yes, must say yes. And the question is, when we are getting into a hospital, when we're getting into a clinic, when we're getting into our clients' institution, do we know who are the user buyers? Do we know who are the technical buyers? Do we know who are the decision makers, economic buyers? It's great if we have a champion. If we don't, we're gonna get there working. But these three buyers, user, technical, and economic, do we know them? I'm gonna show to you a scene from the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt here is playing Billy Bean. And this movie, which was made in 2011, was based on true facts. And basically, Billy Bean, this was not the real name, but Billy Bean was a manager from a baseball team that basically he was using statistics to build the perfect team. So he would come to other teams to buy players that these teams were considering like bad players. Who he would try to buy them for a low price, because he knew they were much more valuable than that. And Peter Brand, which his real name is Peter something, is not Peter Brand, is interpreted here by another actor. I forgot his name, but Peter Brand was basically an analyst on this team, and the manager of this team is the guy that is facing the camera here. And basically, you will see Peter Brand, although he does not have the decision to power, see what happens when Peter Brand says no. He's the guy with glasses. Let me know. I will play that. If you cannot hear the sound, let me know. But take a look into this scene.
Yeah, how much cash? 200K. So Garcia's gonna be a no. You're kidding me, right?
So what happened here, guys? What did you see here? The decision was already done. They were going to get to close on that decision, but then what happened? Well, first of all, could you listen to the audio or not?
Yeah, not correct. I mean, not correctly at all, but I mean, the sound was a bit
Same here.
shorted, like not in continue line.
Okay, so it was cut.
Same here.
But
Yeah,
Cut.
same.
very good. So no, that's great, and thank you so much for letting me know. But what we can see is that in this scene, and let me see if I can bring this back. In this scene, what is happening in this moment? This is Peter Brand. He has no power. He is an analyst, and he was there just sitting outside. He tells something to what would be considered a user buyer, and his comment basically eliminates the deal that was taking place. So what do you see here in the sense of how would you consider Peter Brand, who is the guy on glasses? What did he do here?
Giving information, no?
Giving information. And
yeah,
basically, Peter Brand is what we would call the technical buyer. He was the guy that basically knew the statistics, knew the requirements of the team, and said, "Listen, we cannot sell this player." Afterwards, in the movie, Brad Pitt comes and actually hire Peter Brand. What I'm showing to you is that basically now I'm going to show to you some of the things that each buyer is looking for. So the user buyer, that are usually of the physician, the doctor, they wanted to deliver safer care, they wanted to use the best available innovations, they wanted to create patient satisfaction. Those are the things that they want. The technical buyer, on the other hand, they do not want headaches, because if something happens, this may blow on their side. This may cause them problems. So they want safety, predictability. They want minimum infrastructure work. Oh my God, you're going to install a robotic platform in my hospital. My God, I'll have to change all the electricity wiring. I will have to think about the influence of the electricity in other devices. And if the technical buyer stops that, like Peter Brand did, all the process is stopped. And usually they are considered in the end when they appear, and in many circumstances they cause delay or even cancel the deal. And the economic buyer is somebody that will listen usually as much as the champion, as much as they listen to the user buyer, they will listen to the technical buyer as well. But the economic buyer, who is usually overlooking an institution, they may not be so much interested in how your technology helps patients at least on a first step, but they may be interested in how their institutions will benefit from that in terms of a quality, in terms of a metrics. Let me stop here and ask once again if this makes sense, and your comments about the user, technical, and economic buyer, if you see that difference when you are with your clients. Anybody agrees with these characteristics, this definition of stakeholder, user buyer, technical buyer, or economic buyer? Who thinks this makes sense? Okay, who thinks it doesn't make sense? I guess we're still deciding. Well, very good. So, you know, yeah, go ahead. Any comment?
Just trying to classify the people I interact with in the hospital, wherever. It's true that for heavy equipments, you're absolutely right. And we have usually both type of buyers in front of us, sequentially most of the time. For more generic products, it's a bit more complicated. It's more of the economic buyer only, I would think.
Completely agree. Completely agree. And what you the thought process that you had is exactly what is necessary. You were trying you were classifying, not trying, you were classifying, and that's the thing. That's exactly the point. We may not find all the time the user, the technical and economic buyer, but we have to think, is there a technical buyer related to my product? Because if it is, how can I address him or her? If not, fine, check it. Who is the user buyer? Then of course we always have an economic buyer, but it's important to basically map those. They may not be present all the time. More complex products, indeed, digital health, many circumstances, because this implies into accessing healthcare data and some other characteristics as well. But understanding the difference between them and having this opportunity to map, that's what we're looking for. Any further comment before we go into our break?
Elżbieta speaking. I'm just thinking about, I absolutely agree. I think it's absolutely crucial what you are saying. And I'm just thinking about how to map them in practical life, because you have different sales representatives, different levels of sales representatives, key account managers who somehow cooperate or don't cooperate together. They are the technical buyers, economic buyers. Each of them is different for different divisions, for example. So how to map them? What is the best tool? If it's CRM or some other tool, what is your experience?
Well, the tool, that's a fantastic question, a very advanced question. I personally, I use a CRM tool, and I'm not gonna say the name of the CRM tool because basically it depends on the preference that we have. But in this CRM tool, it allows me to place if the person is an influencer, a user, and has many characteristics there. But the aspect is that by using this CRM, which also gives me alerts saying, listen, you need to go back to this client on this day, but by entering this information, which in the moment that I'm entering this information, it might seem irrelevant, but after 2 months attempting to close a deal, I can look into the client and say, okay, am I wasting time to this person who is already, maybe is already convinced, and I needed to talk to the economic buyer, or say, listen, I haven't found the economic buyer yet. I'm talking to this hospital. I've spoken with so many doctors, but I haven't had the chance to speak with the chief of the medical department, chief of the unit, medical unit, or the hospital director or hospital controller. And that this helps me to move the needle forward, to move forward. So I use CRM to map those things. And my experience is that if we are getting to know people, of course, if we don't enter this information in a process, in a platform, database, even Excel sheet, whatever you use, if we don't use that, we are actually going to be average in the sense of engagements. We're not going to be able to shift our messages to meet the needs of those we are meeting, because we won't be able to remember them. So that's basically the tool that I use. And in order to identify who is who, I basically would take a look into slide 23. And this is, of course, the first way to say, okay, who is using my solution? Who will determine if my solution meets the requirements, whatever the requirements is? And it may be very easy to meet the requirement, but it must meet. And who is taking the final decision? And then I would include that into a CRM system.
Thank you very much. So thinking about training for sales representatives, I'm sure you do a lot of trainings for sales reps, concrete positions. Would you recommend to go through this with them and work with them on identifying individual stakeholders or key opinion leaders, technical champions, and so on? So you would encourage them to for each product to look for these individuals during a training, right?
Yes. What I would suggest is, you are right. That's what I would suggest. How I would suggest, though, is what I wanted to share. Because from my experience, what I have seen is that when we have sales teams of 2 people or more, sometimes hundreds of people, but when we have a sales teams, the best way to convince a sales person is to show the success of his or her colleague is doing. My experience is that when we go into these trainings with sales teams and we start understanding, okay, guys, tell me some positive case examples, some successes that you had. And they started discussing, and we started to explore. And eventually, you will notice that they took on average, the following approach. They went to their institution, their hospital, the client, and they made a conscious attempt to map who is taking the decision, who I needed to talk to, and who I cannot ignore, which is basically economic, user, and technical buyer. They made that effort. And instead of hammering the nail constantly, they said, listen, I needed to go there. I needed to visit this person every single day. That person, I need to get that person on my side. And that person, I will reach to that person only after I get the okays from these two. And they follow this conscious process. And when they say that, our goal is to illustrate this and show to the companies, to the other salespeople, so they can say, listen, my colleague, who is my peer, who works with me, has already applied that, has achieved the success. Why can't I do the same? So that's basically when we go into sales training, to look for internal champions, the case examples of those sales teams, and that seems to have the most convincing power when we have those trainings.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great question indeed. Excellent. Then we go to the last part of our session today, which I'm going to talk a little bit about some aspects about the value creation, and then we are going to have an exercise which should take something around 20 and 30 minutes of your time, a 3-step exercise to apply some of the things we had here. So far, the engagement has been extremely interesting in terms of the depth of your questions, because those are very sophisticated questions. And again, this is fantastic because we can definitely think of aspects we aim to touch upon on sessions 2 and 3 and even 4, but bringing them forward will allow us to make a better mapping of where we wanted to go and how to apply that, because there is a lot of concepts, there are a lot of aspects to consider, but can we apply them? What is the practicalities of implementing them to our sales teams, to our companies? Having said that, talking about the value creation process, and the value creation process, starting with the challenge of the healthcare systems and why value has become more than just a trend to become a part of the answer. I work very much with reimbursement, market access, health economics, because of the consulting company Value Connected. And what we have seen, and I can say this firsthand, is that an increasing reward of a value and an increasing penalization of bad outcomes. So the traditional healthcare system, which unfortunately is the predominant system to this day, but it has been changed, is based on volume. That means the payment, starting from the top, is based on activity. I will do a certain procedure, I receive certain money. I will do another procedure, I receive that. And because I'm being paid by activities, I wanted to maximize my margin because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So initially I wanted to focus on cost, to minimize my cost because I'm going to get paid for my volume. And then I have a fragmented perspective because I'm only care of what is happening on each procedure. I don't see the overall. And in that case, I only want a company to provide me with good cost. I won't say low cost, but a good cost product. And that's, I'm going to perceive companies, distributors, as suppliers. They're just supplying the product that I needed to use to perform my activity. And a typical question that you can see, and a test that you can make to check if that institution, that person is thinking traditionally, is that, let's say you have a complication, and let's say you have an infection or something that occurred badly. What has happened? What happens next? And in many circumstances, we see key opinion leaders, doctors, or many people say, listen, unfortunately, if the patient has a complication and comes back, I will get paid to treat him or her again. I don't want this, but I will get paid. And that's a traditional perception that we have, which again, it is the majority of the case. But it's impressive how much this has become not sustainable and how much we are shifting to value-based healthcare. And this is something that we see every single day. It's growing very fast. So first of all, the payment will be based on outcomes. For example, every single Medicare physician in the United States, which are roughly 98% of the physicians in the United States, they are paid based on outcomes. If their outcomes are, and there are metrics for that, of course, and there are different outcomes that we will measure, but if their outcomes are good or bad, they can have a variation of a plus or minus 20% of their payment. Now, if I am based on outcomes, then I immediately need to focus on quality to provide the quality of care, because these outcomes could be healing, could be patient not returning, not having complications, quality. And in order to measure that, then I cannot have a fragmented perspective. I have to think about the patient overall, which goes straight to our point of a clinical relevance. But wait, if I needed to focus on quality, if I'm gonna get paid based on my outcomes, I cannot rely on suppliers. I must rely on partners who understand my situation and can help me to generate value along the patient pathway. And that's, you can also test a certain professional or institution to say what happens if you have infection, complications, but something like this. And if they say, no, we're going to be penalized, that's an institution, that's a profession that is thinking about value-based healthcare. My point is not that we would go to a volume-based institution. Oh no, I don't want to work with them. No, my point is that their perception is different than a perception of this company, excuse me, this institution. And when you have a situation in which your client is focused on volume, the first challenge is to ensure that you are helping them to understand that the value that you bring goes beyond volume. Now, with an institution like this, then of course it becomes easier to demonstrate. When we look into the typical approaches that we have to the market, we had the conventional selling. I'm not going to read this all, but basically we were selling technical features. My product can do this, can do that, and basically we would discuss brochures, flyers, maybe not even having so many conversations because the flyers are so easy to understand, they're so clear. Then the next step is to talk about economic selling, which a lot of people are doing there. And this is great because we're not talking about product features anymore. We are talking about product benefits in the sense to say, okay, can we reduce cost? Can we manage some aspects of excessive costs or excessive resources? Because cost is not only monetary, but can be days of hospitalization, time of the professionals, and this is already a huge gap, excuse me, huge leap, a huge advancement from conventional selling. But what we are aiming to do here is to go to value-based selling. And the value-based selling, the biggest difference is that instead of focusing on my solution or my product, I will understand first what is happening in the market. Is this institution focused on volume or value? Who are the people involved in the decision? What do they need to see? What are the goals of this institution? How can I align my product to that? It seems a lot of information, but this can be done very quickly, and probably if you are in sales for quite some time, you can do this almost instantaneously. It's a more aspect of placing certain things before you do others. And then we are looking into patient journey. And the biggest aspect of a partner, and this is more for session number 2, is that the partner, a true partner, will not only talk about features, will not only talk about the benefits, but they will demonstrate how their products impacts the business model of their clients. So they will say, listen, I understand your business model. I understand as a hospital, as a clinic, whatever. I understand how you get paid. I understand how you spend money. And this is how we make a change to that. That's what a true partner does. And that's the goal of this entire training program. What I'm going to show to you here is called the cost effectiveness matrix. It's a very, very, I would say, complex name, but this is something we use every single day on average 20 times. Every time that we take a decision, we basically follow the same process. But although it's so obvious, it is a very helpful tool to guide us before getting into a conversation about a product, especially when we are bringing a product to a new client or a new product to a client, we're having this new situation. First is that you think about the competitor, this circle, this gray circle in the middle. Let's say you are selling a technology that does a certain diagnostic or does a certain procedure. Okay, how was this diagnostic performed before? How was this procedure performed? That's the gray circle. Then imagine a horizontal axis. That's the difference of effect. What is the effect that I'm talking about? You tell me. It can be the effect on healing rate, infection rate, can be the effect of hospitalization days. What are you trying to measure? And by the way, there are gonna be many effects you want to measure because you will have different value messages, but one at a time. And then you have the cost. So what we have here is that if we look into the competitor in the middle and the horizontal line axis is effect, If your product is on the left side of the circle, that means you have a less effective product. If it's on the right side, it means you create more effect. And once again, the effect depends on your product. Could be quick diagnostic, better healing, whatever. And same here, if it's on the top part, then it's more costly. If it's on the bottom part, then it's less costly. When we look into this, what we immediately notice, any comment, any question? What we immediately, sorry?
No, all clear.
Okay. Speaking about clear, so who would pay for something that is worse and more expensive? So it's a clear decision. Now, who would not argue for something that is better and cheaper? Of course. The issue is when we have here, like it's a complex decision. Sometimes I do not need all the features that you are providing. I'm happy with a simpler product. And although your product, so that product is less expensive, it doesn't have all the whistles and bells. Maybe in that case here, I'm happy with a less effective product, but also cheaper. That's fine for me. I don't need that. Or, you know what, you are bringing something that is more expensive, but it has additional benefits, and it may be worthwhile. But those are the aspects, those are the quadrants, we say, the quadrants that the decision is a little bit more complex. The problem is that what I see, many circumstances, most companies are in this quadrant here, that they are somehow more effective, more costly, but in fact, they should be here because they are not generating higher costs. There are certain health economics details I would include into this. If there is any health economics we can discuss, but basically, if you are in this quadrant here, your goal is to go downwards towards this other one, which is more effective, less costly, if you can. And by the way, this is called the dominant quadrant. But let me give a real case example. And this was the example with a client. So a client had a certain product, and of course, there was the standard product, the competitor here, and they wanted to introduce that in a country in Europe. And basically, they had some studies published, they had some articles published, some materials, and when they presented that to the user buyer, they will say, listen, okay, we understand that you are providing better results than what we are using, but I'm not pretty sure if this would be replicable to our institution, so I'm not sure, I'm not fully convinced. So in this quadrant, in this matrix, they would be a little bit to the right on the standard product in terms of effect, not so much. But in terms of a cost, okay, your product is 10 times more expensive, so it is more expensive. I'm not sure if it's so good. I'm not sure if I'm gonna buy that. In fact, statistically speaking, they wouldn't, because they are closer to the cost axis, the perception, than the horizontal. Of course, nobody, when they're talking during these meetings, nobody will take a matrix and draw and make those things, but mentally, that's exactly what is happening. And this is great, because our goal is to have that. Our goal is to understand the starting point of the perception. Because when you understand that, then you already realize, okay, there are two things I need to do here. First, I need to convince them about the specific effect that I'm talking about. And then by convincing that, I will subsequently change their perception about cost, most likely. So the way that we did this is basically to focus on case reports, and I'm not saying this should be done by everyone, not saying this, but in this circumstance, the question is, can we replicate these results that we saw in the studies in our practice? And we responded to that not with more randomized control trials, but with more case studies, which talk more about effectiveness. Okay, so they saw that there were certain characteristics to have those case examples inside that hospital under a controlled situation, and they understood and saw the benefits of the product. Okay, now I see that I can obtain roughly the same results that I saw in the studies. And because I have the same results, I start to understand that I can reduce other things that I was doing. And that was a client in Spain, by the way, that basically said, okay, after 3 months working with us, they said, I understand now that this product can help me to avoid patients returning over and over again. I understand that I will pay for these patients returning over and over again. And at the end, I'm spending more on a product that has a better quality, and that patient overall will be cheaper for me. So they decided to purchase and standardize that product. This was a case example of a wound dressing that we were dealing with in Spain. And there are numerous examples. One of them is the robotic surgery, especially for prostatectomy and partial nephrectomy. Partial nephrectomy is when you use you have a surgery in which you remove part of the kidney, but the remaining part of the kidney is still functional. And this can avoid dialysis, this can avoid renal transplant later on, which is way more expensive than a robotic surgery. But I'm just giving some examples here. I don't know if somebody has any comments or wanted to give some examples. The floor is yours. Very good. Very good. This is a quick a set of 2 quick slides that I wanted to show to you, because this is something also a feedback that we receive. Because there are different, in many circumstances, we are selling the same product in different countries, or even different states, different cities, different hospitals. And there might be some perceptions about what that product is. And this is related to completely the innovative aspect of the product. If I may be bringing the same product to a certain location, and this client in that location will say, listen, I've never seen this before, I've heard, I've never touched this product, this is not innovative for me. The same product to another client may be, okay, this is similar to what we are having here, but has improved benefits, has some additional benefits, but it's basically doing the same. Or you can have a Me Too solution. You know, this is exactly like something we have been using here. I don't see much of a difference. Why should I use your technology? The same product can have all these aspects. An example of that we had with a client was a camera for laparoscopic procedures that were able to provide a super high level of detail. For some hospitals, this was completely innovative because they were starting to invest in laparoscopic surgery, and for them to have that camera that would allow them even to use AI to help with the procedure would be fantastic. Others, the improved one, were already using high-level definition cameras, and they saw the additional benefit of looking into the vascularization, things like that. But the other Me Too solutions will say, listen, we use something exactly like you're doing from the competitor. What else are you offering? And that's the part that we get into this table here. I won't go into all the details, you will have the slides later on, but then if you are innovative, if you are the only one bringing a solution that does that, focus on that uniqueness. Focus on that uniqueness in the sense of, okay, how can you be the only one generating that value? If you are improved the quantification, an improved solution, which means your competitor is something similar but you are better, focus on quantifying that. How can you quantify that in terms of efficiency, costs, clinical? And if you are a Me Too product, then maybe you have a better full service around that. Maybe you respond faster, maybe you have a better customer service program, maybe you can expand it to other areas, but don't focus on your product itself. Try to always to shift from that and focus on the strengths that you bring. So this is just a prism that I placed it there. This came from feedback of many of the trainings that we had, because the same product, we must accept that, may have different perceptions depending on where we go.
Ernesto, can I have a question? Again, I'll go back to the sales representatives. If you want to teach them how to sell the value, how to use the clinical relevance, somebody to work with this chart, somebody has to prepare it. Somebody has to think about it. I don't think it's the skill of the sales representatives, or they even don't have time to do that. Or they could find time, but mostly they won't find time. So what would you recommend if we want to train our sales representatives on this? How should we help them to look at the global thing, the global value selling? Who should help them to prepare these aspects? Because looking at the market, looking at the customers, looking at the clinical aspects, it's not their skill and not much time for that.
No, absolutely not. I remember the best salesperson I ever met in my life was a salesperson that had a set of scripts in order to engage with clients. And when those scripts were not working, I remember him after 4 months of talking to a customer to go into something like that. Okay, I won't give up on you. I will keep trying until you understand the value that I'm bringing. So the sales reps, in that sense, they do not have the time, and they are probably not going to make all these analysis, but they must be prepared for that. And typically the responsibility lies on marketing and market access. Many companies do not have market access departments. In fact, market access should be responsibility for the entire company, such as sales. But the marketing department is the department that basically will determines what are the value messages that must be emphasized. The sales teams, what they needed to understand, and what we are doing here in this program, is to build a value selling process strategy. But when that value process strategy is ready, what we are going to have is that for this product and change of the product, this product impacts these types of value messages, which I'm going to show here in this slide. Having that already will allow sales teams to say, okay, I have maybe 3 to 5 value messages, no more than that. 3 to 5 value messages out of 20 value messages that they could say, but they have 3 to 5. And then once I know what I need to say, the next steps to whom I need to communicate that and how. The how, it's more sessions 3 and 4, but what, to whom, and how, that's what we needed to give to the sales teams. That's what we need to say. Listen, if you're talking to for example, a clinical decision maker, focus on this and that. And these are the things that how you're going to show that. Brochures with digital tools, that does not matter. However, once you have that, don't forget that you also needed to talk to the economic decision makers. And this is how those value messages translate into economic. So the biggest benefit, if I would summarize in one word, that we can give to the sales teams is the script. And by creating the script, the marketing department, the company, instead of pushing articles, studies downwards, they start to realize, okay, where can I best use this piece of evidence? Which evidence is missing? Maybe I can supplement with something else, or ask somehow to generate that evidence. So that's basically how we would engage that to sales teams to deliver a script for them.
Thank you.
Now, before the pandemic, we used to have 2 groups of value, and since the pandemic, a third one became known as well and official. In France, they also use the same term. Now, when we look into value messages, remember everything starts with the clinical relevance. So the first type of value message that we have is clinical value. And the clinical value is related to clinical outcomes. Okay, can I improve healing? Can I reduce complications? Things related to the patient, clinical relevance. However, if I have clinical value, how can I extract the economic value for that? And the economic value has 2 paths. Resources, which can be days hospitalization in the ICU, normal bed, could be materials, or could be simply costs. Oh, I don't know the costs of that how to manage the cost. I don't know the cost of that host. Okay, but do you know how many days you can save or how many hours you can save? This is already something we can comment. So the clinical value will allow understanding the clinical value allows us to understand the economic value. My question is, does anybody know what is the third pillar of a value that has been created after the pandemic and is official in countries such as France? So that means when you submit your technology to the HAS, the High Healthcare Authority in France, they will ask, what is your, does anybody know that?
Service or something like that, no? The answer to the chain or to the hospital, maybe.
Social, maybe.
Exactly. They call it differently, but it's exactly the same aspect. They call it organizational value, which means how can your technology impact my institution? Does it increase efficiency? Does it impact efficiency? That means I can produce more of the same resources or even fewer resources. And does it improve workflow? And this is a big benefit for digital health. Does it allow the data to be transmitted seamlessly and allows us to take faster decisions? But what is important here is the sequence. The clinical, first we need to understand the clinical value. That's the clinical relevance. Once we understand that, then it's much easier to derive the economic value. And from that you think, okay, when we look into the organizational value, how can we impact that as well? Those are the three categories. This is actually one of the most important slides of this session as well. What is the clinical economic organizational value? To the minimum, your sales teams must have at least one key value message for each of these groups, at minimum. Now, let's get into a case exercise. I know we're running out of time, so we're gonna do this a little bit faster. So first of all, I just want to say that I'm gonna ask you some questions for this case exercise. Of course, there is no need to do any external research. Just use your judgment, use your knowledge. The most important thing is that we start to move forward, and if possible, take some notes, because this will help you to organize your thoughts. Now, the first part, which let's take 5 minutes or less, is that I would like you to think about a medical technology. And when you think about this medical technology, what is intended for? What is the indication? Could be more than one. Fine. What is the competitor? If I'm not using your technology, what will I use? Even if it's nothing. And where in the patient flow is this medical technology applied? I'm not asking what is the impact on patient flow. No, I'm just saying, is this technology used in the initial part, like diagnostic, late stage, or in the middle? That's it. And then the last thing is, who would be the user buyer of this technology? A physician, a surgeon, a nurse? Who would be the technical buyer, the bioengineer, the pharmacist? And who would be the economic buyer, the decision maker? And think about the technology. You can change later, but think about the challenging technology, because we wanted to maintain the same technology from part 1 until part 4 of our training sessions as we move forward to we will build together a value-based selling strategy for this technology. But first of all, select a medical technology. I will give 2 more minutes for that before moving ahead. If somebody has any questions, please feel free to ask me now. And take note of your technology and the things that you see here in this slide. I'll give 1 more minute. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to let me know. I guess everybody's done. Anybody still selecting a medical technology, or can we move forward? If nobody says anything, I'll move forward. Okay, now let's map the potential value messages. I'm saying here selected 2, 3 to 5 value messages, but let's select 1 to 2, 1 or 2 value messages. Considering the product that you just thought about or wrote, select 1 or 2 value messages. Then what is the clinical relevance for that? In other words, how does that value message translates into the patient pathway? And then how does that compare against your competitor or comparator? So for example, I have a product X, Y, and Z that allows for a faster and safer procedure. Well, if I allow for that, then the clinical relevance is that the patient can recover faster and can go back to her or his home earlier. And the competitor may require a 2-step procedure, and our product solution only needs 1. So take 1 or 2 value messages from the product that you just considered. Think about that. Think about the clinical relevance and how do you compare against the competitor or competitor. I will give 2 more minutes for us. If you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to let me know. I cannot read the chat, but if there are comments in chat and somebody can read that for me, I would appreciate it. One more minute. Okay. Does anybody need more time? Good. Then we go into the last part. So we thought about the product, we thought about the 1 or 2 key value messages, their importance to clinical, their impact on the clinical relevance, their clinical relevance, and how does that compare against a competitor or a competitor. The last part is that how these value messages would be relevant to each of the decision maker. Note, we are not trying to adapt the value message. That's not the goal here. It's much simpler than that. What we are trying to see is these value messages, for example, faster and safer procedure. Does it resonate, for example, with a user buyer? Yes, because they are the users of the product and they are performing the procedure. The technical buyer, not relevant. Do not try to adapt. Just say not relevant. And then the economic buyer, well, it may relate if faster and safer procedures are related to the quality metrics of a hospital, for example. So take the 1, 2 value messages that you brought together. I'll give another 2 minutes and just think the relevance for the user buyer, technical buyer, and economic buyer. And whenever somebody is done, please, I would love to have 2 or 3 examples from you that you can tell me, Ernesto, I thought about this product, I thought about this value message, and I believe it would resonate with the user buyer, not with the economic buyer, maybe with the technical buyer. If we can have 2 or 3 case examples that are no right or wrong answers. I'm just looking for the thought process here. So whoever finished first, please let me know and let's share some thoughts. And just as a technical check, is my audio okay for everyone?
It's perfectly fine. Thank you, Ernesto.
Thank you. So we have 30 more seconds. If somebody has already finished this part, please open up the mic and share with us. Tell me the product you selected, tell me one value message, and then using this table, share with us if you think the value message is relevant or not to each of these decision makers. Time's up. Who's gonna be first? Okay, we do not have anyone participating. That's okay, that's fine. We will have the slides later, but it will be great if you do that exercise as well, to basically go into the thought process that we want also to initiate a session 2, which of course is not going to take place today. But some questions that I have for you, and let me pop them up here. I would love to hear your thoughts as we go towards the end of our session today. If what are your thoughts about going to this process? If you had sufficient value messages to address all your stakeholders, the problem, what I'm trying to ask here is, does one single value message is sufficient to address the needs of everyone involved in the purchasing process of your product?
Don't think so.
Excellent. Well, let's definitely go into the closure because now we are running out of time. So what we did cover today was the definition of a value and value creation, which is based on the importance of a clinical relevance. We looked into the value messages groups, which are clinical, economic, organizational values, the type of decision makers, technical, economic, and user buyers, and the foundations of value-based selling, which is the aspect of considering the impact of your technology in the business model. Not only talk about features, not at all. Talking about benefits is not sufficient because we don't know if these benefits are relevant, but understanding the business model of your client, then of course it's another story. How to understand the business model of your client, this is something that we will discuss in the next session. Now, one last question to you all. I want everyone participating because this is really fun, really fun. Now, if you have this situation here, you are flying an airplane and there are no hidden questions here, hidden points. Tell me, if you are under this circumstance, you are flying an airplane, where would you be looking at under these circumstances? Everybody, tell me, where would you be looking at?
In front.
In front. Okay, anyone else? There are no right or wrong answers, guys. Would you look to the lake, to the sky, to the ground? Where would you be looking at?
I'll be looking where I want to get.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Yes, yes. And that's what is called the visual-based flight. Now, what would you do here? Where would you be looking at?
I guess to the computer.
I would be praying, but yes, we would be looking to the computer. This is called instrument-based flight. The reason that I'm bringing this to you is because the purpose of this training is to provide you with a series of tools and methods that when you are getting into a situation that you cannot see what is out there, when you cannot clearly see what your clients want, when you cannot clearly see how they will perceive your technology, which is the picture on the right, these will serve to you as the instruments to say, what do I need to collect? How do I need to prepare? So I won't be able to see 300 kilometers ahead of me, but I know that I'm safe for the next 1 kilometer. I'm going to manage that. Okay, I dealt with this situation, learned more, let's deal with another one. That's the process, that's the goal if I would create a visualization of this selling process, this online training with you. And remember, it's not about the product that you're selling, it's how it impacts the patient journey, patient pathway, the clinical relevance in that sense. Now, this is the last slide before I say goodbye, and the session number 2 in February 2024. Simon, I hope you like these pictures of yours because I obtained that from the LinkedIn. So if you, yes, so if you wanted to register for session number 2, of course, this from now on, this will be a paid program. I hope you liked the session so far, but in session number 2, what we will do is to bring very more real case examples of companies that responded well to price pressure, responded badly, and did not respond to price pressure at all. And then you look into the 3 categories, we're gonna derive what can be done, what lessons were learned, and what can be organized in order to respond to this situation. Having said that, I want to say thank you for your participation. Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays to all of you. Happy New Year. And of course, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, any comments.
Thank you, Ernesto. It was great to see you. Great program. Appreciate it. And enjoy the summer in Brazil.
I will. I will. Simon, any final words you wanted to say?
I just wanted to say thank you as well. Thank you for the participants for staying. Actually, 2 hours on a call. It's quite some time, so thank you for that. Also, just to encourage others to evaluate whether it's worth it or not. I would say it is, because it's not just the fact that selling trainings, at least I would say once a year, are relevant, but also selling program focused on value. That's pretty current thing, and also connected to the technology, and from someone who has a background in AI as well. I think that is worthwhile. And so that's just what I wanted to say to all the participants, that this is worth your time, and I hope you realize it. So thank you, Ernesto, once again. Thanks everybody else. And if there is nothing else, I wish you Merry Christmas, and I hope to see you next year.
Thank you, guys. Be well.
Thank you,
Bye.
Ernesto.
Thank everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ernesto. It was a great talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Bye.